there? Or is it simply going to be we insist getting our way in full all the time? Don't think that's an acceptable way to arrive at common ground, and I don't think it's likely to succeed. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I am so pleased to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, our incredible member of the Committee on Rules, Mr. McGovern.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I thank the distinguished ranking member for the time. Mr. Speaker, here we are on day 4 of the Republican shutdown of the people's government. Day 4. The other day, after a meeting with the President at the White House, Speaker Boehner said, and I quote, "At some point, we've got to allow the process that our founders gave us to work out." End quote. Mr. Speaker, I've studied American history too, and what the Republican leadership is doing with this rule is a million miles away from what the founders had in mind. I'm trying to find it comforting that Speaker Boehner has said privately that he wants to extend the debt ceiling. But he also said that he didn't want to shut down the government, and yet here we are. And I don't know what Senator Cruz is saying privately, which is important because he's apparently calling all the shots around here. The rule before us today extends martial law rule until October 21st. They have decided that they have the right to throw the rules and traditions of this House into the trash can for the next 2.5 weeks. That's 4 days after we default on our obligations. That should make all of us very, very, very nervous. The rule also makes in order 11 separate bills, many of which were never considered in committee or on the House floor, under a closed process with no amendments. Now, I've been on and around the Rules Committee for quite a few years, Mr. Speaker, but I have never, ever seen a rule like this. I find it astounding that the Republicans have suddenly found religion on the need to go to conference on the budget, because for months and months and months and months they have refused to appoint budget negotiators. But suddenly, as the American people rise up in outrage over their tactics and their poll numbers fall off a cliff, my Republican friends all of a sudden now want to negotiate. Well, there's a very easy way to get past this. Bring up the short-term, clean, continuing resolution that has already passed the Senate at Republican sequester numbers, no less. Bring it up, and we will pass it with a bipartisan vote and end this unnecessary, harmful Republican shutdown. It is simple. But Mr. Speaker, not only is this process awful, so are many of the bills made in order under this rule. Now, I want to talk about one in particular that has, and that's the one that provides funding for WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children's Nutrition Program. After months of trying to cut $40 billion from the SNAP program, after months of demonizing poor people, after months of trying to slash food assistance programs across the board, Republicans would like us all to believe that they care about hunger in America all of a sudden. Give me a break. Give me a break, Mr. Speaker. I've said to my Republican friends, where have you been? Where have you been on this issue? Because of the sequester, we've already seen WIC clinics closed and participation in the program fall. That means that fewer and fewer low-income women and children are getting help, the nutritious food that they need. This bill does not fix that. The National WIC Association urges the House to oppose H.J. Res. 75, calling it, quote, a cynical ploy to use low-income, nutritionally at-risk mothers and young children as political pawns for political ends, end quote. They are right, Mr. Speaker. This is a cynical, cynical ploy. Enough is enough. I urge my colleagues to defeat this rule and pass the clean CR and let the American people get on with their lives. I would say to the Speaker of the House, all you need to do is schedule a vote. You don't even have to vote for it. But if you schedule it, it will pass in a bipartisan manner, and we can end this shutdown once and for all. Please, Mr. Speaker, please practice a little democracy in the People's House. Please, Mr. Speaker, give us a vote. Give us a vote. I yield back my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Just a quick point, my friend is always quite eloquent, and I know, frankly, very passionate and very well-meaning and very expert when he talks about nutrition programs, where he spent a great deal of time. But for the record, it's worth noting that we have increased nutrition programs, Rodney, by 400% since George Bush became president. We doubled them roughly when Bush was president, doubled them again while President Obama, since he's been in office. What the Republican program is talking about is a 5% cut after a 400% increase based on reforms. So I think it's maybe not quite so dire, but again, I recognize my friend's good work in this area and hope that we have an opportunity to get to conference, have that discussion. I suspect the bill that comes back may be closer to his liking than the bill that went out, but we'll wait and see. But certainly yield to my friend.
No, I thank the gentleman for yielding. My objection with the Republican approach to the SNAP program is that 3.8 million people will lose their benefits, 170,000 veterans would lose their benefits, and we have a problem with hunger in America. We have close to 50 million people who are hungry, 17 million are kids. We should all be ashamed of that. We should be coming together to try to solve the problem, not making it worse. And so that's where my frustration and anger comes from.
Reclaiming my time. The rolls have been going up in a period that we're supposed to be recovering. And I think we have some genuine problems in this program in terms of reform. But again, that's the initial proposal. It's not out of bounds considering a 400% increase to have a 5% cutback. But we'll wait and see what comes out of the conference committee. With that, Mr. Speaker, no, I will not. My gentleman's going to have some time of his own shortly, I suspect.
Well, but I want to
Mr. Speaker, with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Time is reserved. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the Democrat whip, Mr. Hoyer.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the ranking member of the Rules Committee for yielding, and I thank Ms. Slaughter for the extraordinary leadership she has shown and the work she has been doing. Mr. Speaker, the people want their government opened. A government of the people and for the people and by the people ought to be open. They want their dedicated federal employees who have been unfairly furloughed to go back to work. And they want to end the shutdown that is having negative consequences for our economy and for our national security and for the confidence of Americans that their government can work. The only way to do so is by passing a clean, get the government open funding bill to keep the government open while we discuss, negotiate, put forward our positions, a longer-term agreement on the budget. The Senate's acted, and acted responsibly, by passing a bill that will keep the government operating. They passed that bill with the number that was suggested by the Republican Party, Mr. Speaker. Now we have the opportunity to do the same thing right now and end this shutdown. Get the people's government back to work. There are a growing number of Republicans who say they would vote for a bill which is so-called clean, not with any of the poison pills that have been on it time after time after time. I tell them this is your opportunity to back up your words with actions. Don't just say, let's end the shutdown. Vote with us in just a few minutes to end the shutdown. On Wednesday, Majority Leader Cantor said this, and I quote, "We're trying to get this government open as quickly as possible." As quickly as possible is in about 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. That's as quickly as possible. I don't know it's as quickly as probable because I'm not sure the Majority Leader means those words or that his party means those words, but we're going to have an opportunity to vote on it. I say to my friend from Virginia, here is our chance to do so. And to the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lankford, Mr. Cole's colleague, who said about the shutdown he and his Republican colleagues have imposed, quote, "I'd like to end it this afternoon." I say we can do it. He's right. And just a few minutes, Mr. Lankford's going to have the opportunity to vote that way. In just a few minutes. Now, it's either empty rhetoric or he means what he says. Let's do it. Let's open government. Let's get the people's public servants back to work for them. Right here, right now, we can end this shutdown today, this afternoon, in just a few minutes. I urge my colleagues, we don't differ. As I understand it, everybody on both sides of the aisle says they don't want to shut down government. Mr. Cole says that. Ms. Slaughter says that. I say that. We have the power to just in a few minutes put people back to work for all of our constituents. I urge my colleagues, vote no on this motion, the previous question we call it, jargon for saying let's move on, and if we vote no on the previous question, we can put a bill on the floor which will put the government back to work this afternoon. Mr. Cole knows we can do that. I don't know that Mr. Cole will vote to do that. I think Ms. Slaughter will vote to do that. I will vote to do that. Mr. Andrews will vote to do that. Others will vote to do that. And if they do, if they match their actions with their talk, then we can open this government in just a matter of minutes. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to my good friend and fellow members of the Rules Committee, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from the Rules Committee for yielding me the time. Mr. Speaker, I listened with great interest to what my friend, the Minority Whip, just said. He said there are things that we agree on. Why can't we get those things done? I would say that every single member that the Majority Whip pointed out that said, I know they're going to vote for that, I know they're going to vote for that, I know they're going to vote for that, we have an opportunity today to vote to reopen parts of the Department of Homeland Security. I know we agree on that. Let's do that. We have the opportunity under this rule to go ahead and fund the WIC program. I know we agree on that. Let's do that. I didn't come to that conclusion on my own, Mr. Speaker. I sit in the Rules Committee and I listen to my colleagues. This happens to be the Minority Whip from a Rules Committee hearing. He said this. He said the American people are obviously deeply distressed. They are distressed that when they see agreement, that agreement is not made into law. We don't have an agreement on everything, but we do have an agreement. Let's move forward on that which we agree. I agree. Every single provision that we are bringing to the floor today, I say to Mr. Speaker, is something on which we agree.
Yield?
I'd be happy to yield if I have time remaining. The gentleman knows I'll be happy to yield, and I absolutely will. Let us move forward on that with which we agree. There is not one provision in this rule on which we disagree. And, Mr. Speaker, you will not hear anyone on this floor say otherwise. But it's not just the Minority Whip, which, again, I would very much like to yield to if I have time remaining. It's the Minority Leader. Same Rules Committee hearing. Here is a place where we are all in agreement. Whatever else we have, we can continue that conversation later. Whatever else we have, we can continue that conversation later. Let's do what we all agree on.
Will the gentleman now yield?
I agree with my friend, the Minority Whip. I agree with the Minority Leader. As I have said to my friend very respectfully, if I have time remaining at the end, I would be happy to yield. But at the moment, I do not. Very respectfully to my friend. And it's not just my friend, the Minority Whip. It's not just the Majority Leader, Minority Leader. It's President Barack Obama. I want the American people to urge Congress soon to begin the work we have by doing what we all agree on. We already all agree on making sure middle-class taxes don't go up, so let's get that done. We did. We did. Now, some Republicans voted no and some Democrats voted no, but the chamber came together and we got that done. We're in the same place today, Mr. Speaker. If one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle disagrees with any one of these provisions, believes any one of these provisions is not worthy of their vote, if they do not affirmatively want to see these programs reopened, I'd like to hear that from my friends. But, Mr. Speaker, they do. I would ask my friend if I could have one additional minute.
Actually, I want to give my friend, I'll yield as much time as you may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank my friend for yielding. I'd like to yield to my friend, the minority whip.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Does the gentleman believe that we should shut down the government?
Reclaiming my time, I'd say to my friend, I spent the entire month of August at every town hall meeting I could find telling folks government shutdowns were not the right plan for this nation.
Then we thank the gentleman for continuing to yield. Then we agree not only on the small slices of which the gentleman has spoken and which are on the floor today, but on the whole, and we could put every employee back to work for the American people today because, as you say, we agree.
Reclaiming my time say to the gentleman that no, we do not agree, because the gentleman wants to continue to support those programs that are putting workers in my district out of work. They want to continue to support those programs that are taking health insurance away from families in my district. They want to continue to support those programs that we know are broken. Folks, my constituency wants to do away with pre-existing conditions. My constituency wants to ensure that every child has access to health coverage. But my constituency does not understand why we had to regulate the entire health care industry, destroying the 40-hour work week, as my union friends have said, destroying quality health care plans that folks in my district have had but have now lost, breaking the promise the President made that if you like your health insurance, you can keep it. There's not a man or woman in this room that believes that promise has been kept. We were duped, Mr. Speaker, by that promise. Today, however, we have straightforward, narrow bills. Not 2,400 pages of legislation, Mr. Speaker, but one idea at the time. Stand up, Mr. Speaker. Who doesn't believe that the Department of Homeland Security, focused on our nation's security, should be funded? Stand up and vote no, but you believe that it should be, and you're going to vote no anyway. Who doesn't believe that the Impact Aid program from the Department of Education that helps children not just in my district but in every district, Mr. Speaker, who doesn't believe that ought to be funded? The truth is everyone believes that ought to be funded, and yet they're going to stand up today and vote no anyway, encouraged to vote no by leadership. It's disappointing to me, Mr. Speaker. I'm disappointed we can't agree on everything, but I recognize that we can't. I know that we agree on most things. Let's do those things on which we agree. Don't take my word for it. Take President Obama's word for it. Let's begin the work we have by doing what we all agree on. Take Nancy Pelosi's work for it. Let's do what we all agree on. We can continue the rest of that conversation later. Let's do what my good friend, the minority whip, who just left the floor, said. We don't have an agreement on everything, but we do have an agreement. Let's move forward on that with which we agree. I could not agree more, Mr. Speaker. I urge a strong yes vote for this rule and a strong yes vote for every single underlying provision. I thank my friend on the Rules Committee for yielding to me, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 30 seconds, maybe 45. My colleagues have confused the fact that they go around saying, and have indeed throughout August and all the rest of this time, that they don't want to shut down the House. In some hope, I guess, that nobody would understand when they shut down the House that they had actually done it. Now, what my colleague is talking about from the Democrat side, what they're saying, let's do what we agree with, they're taking their word for it that you didn't want to shut down the House, so let's not do it. You cannot superimpose that notion onto the idea of setting up this government by dibs and drabs. None of us are for that. The Senate won't do it. You know this is an exercise in futility, but pretty soon the previous questions coming up, you're going to have a chance to do what you said you didn't want to do, shut down the House. But I understand from what you said, that because of health care and what you think it has done to people in your district, you are holding this country hostage.
Would the gentlelady yield?
I don't have the time. The time is all given. I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
I reserve.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
The inquiry.
Could you tell me how much time is remaining with the gentlelady from New York?
Gentlelady from New York has 13 minutes remaining. Gentleman from Oklahoma has 12.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield 2 minutes to my good friend from the great state of Florida, Mr. Mica.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we are here on a Friday. Government has partially been shut down for some 4 days now. Republicans have tried to be reasonable. Many of us did not like Obamacare. Some folks like myself, my family didn't have health care at certain times, and I thought we had a responsibility to help people who had pre-existing conditions, help some of our young people. And we disagreed with the other side. They passed it. They said you'd know what was in the bill after we passed it. After we passed it and became the law, we saw what was in it. The President, some 17 times now, many times in countervention to the law that was passed, changed the law. Now, we came a few days ago, October 1st, there wasn't money to run the government, but there was money to run Obamacare. Still, many people were left in the lurch after many exceptions were made for special interest folks, even business. I admit to being pro-business. They gave them a waiver. But when we said members of Congress and also the White House staff and others should be under Obamacare, when we said that the individual should also have a break here, this is a system that the Democrats, some Democrats said was a train wreck. We didn't say that. But we should have the opportunity to make some changes. And we offered 3 opportunities to make changes, some of them minor, that we thought were fair. But when you go out golfing on the Saturday before the government's about to run out of money, when you don't show up for work on Sunday, and you come to work on Monday, as the United States Senate did, you can't negotiate. When you send people to the White House and sit there and say, we won't negotiate, can I have an additional minute?
Yield my friend an additional minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 additional minute.
When our leaders in good faith go to the White House, and I stood in the well here and urged the President, as a staffer, I used to get calls. I was a staffer with Senator Hawkins, and Ronald Reagan would ask me to help work with my boss and others to get things done. I voted on this floor to impeach Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton came back and worked with us. We balanced the budget. Remember, after we had the last shutdown, 95, within 2 years, we balanced the budget. We reformed welfare. We balanced the budget. Actually, the debate here on September 11th, just before September 11th, was what to do with the surplus. So some good can come out of this. Good people working together. But when they won't negotiate, when they call you to the White House and he won't talk, when he goes to Maryland, as they did, or wherever he was in the region here, and then tells folks that we're holding a gun to their head, that's wrong. Let's negotiate. Let's get this done for the American people. You'll back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I'm feeling quite badly. I didn't know how much time I had. I would be happy to yield more time to Mr. Mica if he would like it.
Gentlelady has 13 minutes remaining.
Yes. I'd be happy to yield him a minute if he'd like.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Well, then I'll yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Illinois, a member of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, Mr. Davis.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentlewoman from New York for yielding. I oppose this rule, and I oppose the bill. And I don't oppose it because my district does not need the assistance. I represent one of the most impoverished and disadvantaged districts in America. We have great need. But fortunately, many of my constituents know the difference. between genuinely trying to help them, or as the guys in the barbershop might say, gaming them. Or they may say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Or they could say that this piecemeal approach is not going to cut it. Poverty in my state of Illinois is at nearly 15%, and in my district, child poverty is 40%. Women, 28%, African Americans, 38%, 23% of Asian Americans, and 24% of Latinos in my district live in poverty. Overall, 196,478 people in my district live in poverty. So you can see we need the assistance, but we also need affordable health care. We need LIHEAP. We need mortgage assistance. We need to get homeless people off the street during Chicago's cold winters. Therefore, I cannot support this piecemeal approach. What we need is a clean CR so that our employees can return to work and our people can receive the services and benefits that they so greatly need and rightly deserve. We need a clean CR. I thank the gentlewoman from New York for yielding, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished chairman of the Appropriations Committee, my good friend, the Honorable Hal Rogers.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and might I engage in a colloquy with the gentleman?
Certainly.
What is the normal procedure, the time-honored procedure in the Congress when the two bodies disagree? How do we normally work that out?
Mr. Chairman, we schedule a conference, we go to conference, and we try to negotiate our differences.
That's the time-honored tradition. That's the way the place works. That's the way it should operate. That's regular order. Now, the Senate has passed a bill. The House has passed a bill which disagree with each other. The House, 2 or 3 nights ago now, passed their motion to go to conference, and it passed the House. The Speaker of the House then appointed conferees from the House side and sent that to the Senate, waiting for the Senate to appoint conferees so that we can meet together, work out our differences, and bring that agreement back to each body, the House and the Senate. Why aren't we proceeding on regular order in this case? Do you have an answer?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't. I would just highly recommend to my friends that we do, since it seems to be a good way to resolve our differences.
Well, that's the way we've done it for 200 years or so, and that is to, when we disagree with the other body, we each appoint our conferees. The conferees go off and haggle and amend and change and argue and debate until there's some agreement that can be brought back to each chamber, which then can reject or accept that conference report. The House has acted. We're waiting on the Senate to appoint their conferees so that we can go off and work 24 hours a day if necessary to come to an agreement, which we can do. And I would urge the other body to honor the age-old tradition in the Congress. When you disagree with the other body, you appoint conferees to work out the differences and bring it back to each body. And I would hope that the Senate would do that. I yield.
Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I just want the time to say that a regular order has not been the order of business in this House for a long time. I am pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture, Ranking Member Mr. Farr.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Slaughter, for yielding, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a member of the Appropriations Committee. This process is about appropriations. That's how we keep government open, and unfortunately we've never been able to get any of the appropriations bills to the floor because Republicans won't appoint conferees to the joint committees. So we're doing a continuing resolution. Continuing resolution is not new to this Congress. It's been done every year. The shocking thing is it's never been used as a weapon of destruction until now. We were here last year, same argument. The health care bill is not the issue here. That's been law in this country for 3.5 years. So for 3.5 years, we've been appropriating money to keep government open. What's the difference now? The difference now is a new attitude, new breed, very mean, very conservative, very anti-government. And they're willing to bring their internal kind of power within their caucus to shut down the whole country, if not the whole world. It's totally irresponsible. And they argue, well, we could do this if we could change the health care bill. If the health care bill needs changing, bring it up in a bill. That's how we change things. So I'm opposing this rule because this rule says, okay, let's bring up 10 parts of government. Let's bring up 10 parts. Let's just have multiple choice. Let's have a triage. Which parts of government do you like? And I'd like to compliment my colleague, Mr. Cole, because in it, we keep open. We can't be against all health care because we keep open in one of these bills, H.R. 80, the Indian Health Services. So obviously we're going to provide health care services for some low-income people, but we're against any other system that might provide assistance for other kinds of low-income people. So this is government by multiple choice. It's not working. That's why we oppose it. Let's bring the whole family, the whole nation together. Reject this rule. Reject the ability to defeat the previous question and defeat the rule and get on with a CR that is in this House and can be voted on right now.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to reserve my time for the
Gentleman's
moment.
time is reserved. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I believe I've only got one more speaker in the room. So I want to inform my colleague that after Mr. Andrews, I may be prepared to close. But I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes. Without objection. Gentleman's recognized.
I thank my friend for the time. There's been an avalanche of talk from both sides, an avalanche of opinion. That's democracy. I think there is one indisputable fact, and that is the one way to end the government shutdown today is for the House to pass the Senate bill and send it to the President. That would end the shutdown immediately. Now, it's my opinion that a majority of members of the House would vote in favor of that proposal if it reaches the floor. I think that's what would happen. But it's my conviction, and I think it should be our shared conviction, that we ought to take a vote on it. We ought to let all 433 members that are present here cast a vote on whether they want the Senate bill to pass or not. And if our side wins, fine. If our side loses, that's fine too. That's democracy. After this avalanche of talk, there is going to be a chance in a few minutes for people to actually vote on this question. And this is not the technical procedural language, but it's the reality language. What this vote's really going to ask is this. Do you want the government shutdown to continue or not? If you vote no, that you don't want the government shutdown to continue, the Senate bill will come to the House floor this afternoon, and we'll take that vote. If you vote yes, then the Senate bill will not come to the House floor, and we'll continue on this everlasting process of burdening the American people, talking the issue to death, and not getting anything done. I think we owe it to the American people to all stand up and raise our hands, either say yes or no on the Senate bill. If your answer is no, your answer is no. Mine would be yes. But the way to make that happen is to cast this vote in a few minutes. The question on this vote is, do you want the government shutdown to continue or not? If your vote is no, then we vote on the Senate bill. If your vote is yes, then we don't, and the shutdown continues. The American people deserve this vote. Mr. Speaker, give us this vote. I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have some good news I want to announce here just shortly, but I want to note for the record, my friends quite often make the point that they don't like a piecemeal approach. The reality is, if you look at actions, there's sometimes they do. They like it until they don't. I want to point out we had, of course, H.R. 3210 here, which funded the military by our good friend from Colorado, Mr. Kaufman. I think in a very bipartisan way we voted overwhelmingly on both sides to fund the military and most of the contracting and civilian employees. There's a little disagreement with the administration about that right now, but that's half the discretionary budget taken care of in a quote, piecemeal approach. Today, the administration just announced, and I commend them for doing it, and I commend my friend because she announced she was going to be supportive of this too, and I think we all are. It's very evident in the Rules Committee, H.R. 3223, Federal Employee Retroactive Pay Fairness Act. The administration's just announced that they're going to support that legislation. The President looks forward to signing it, and that's a bipartisan agreement between both sides and, frankly, a product of the work of our mutual good friends, Mr. Moran of Virginia and Mr. Wolf of Virginia, who found common ground and, in a piecemeal approach, moved us closer to a solution. So I think that's maybe not the greatest news in the world, but in a day where there's not as much good news as we would all like, some good news. And I would hope my friends would look at the individual pieces of legislation that are coming where we mostly agree and accept those. We don't have to agree on everything, as a point's been made by several, to agree on some things. Those are areas that we do agree. And if we can fund our military in this fashion, and if we can make sure that our federal employees are not going to lose any pay retroactively, certainly, you know, one step at a time, we can walk in the right direction and turn back on critical parts of our government. I hope that's what we're moving toward, Mr. Speaker. And with that, I'll reserve the balance of my time, so my friend knows I'm quite prepared to close whenever she wishes to close.
Gentleman's time is reserved.
Thank you very
Gentlelady
much.
from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am absolutely going to vote to retroactively fund the federal employees because that's the best I can do on that one issue. It is a matter of basic fairness, but it is not good enough. The fact is that the federal employees will not get paid their retroactive money until after all this charade is over. We have no idea when that's going to be. I think let me reiterate again what all my colleagues have said. We can do it right now. Put them back to work and let them get their paycheck. I'm embarrassed every time I pass the Capitol Police at what's happening to them. It bothers me terribly to hear from my friends at the State Department that they're working on fumes. We cannot run the government of the United States, which is the beacon of democracy, has been the pattern for countries all over the world, by saying we're going to fund this piece over there and that piece over there, and we don't care what happens to the rest of it. That's not what we are here for. Certainly we will fund that one piece, but I can tell you right now the Democrats are not going to do any of the rest of it because the Senate is not going to take it up and the President is not going to sign it. We are simply wasting time. And we're taking up valuable time, and we are worrying the country half to death. For heaven's sake, when we do this previous question, let us do the right thing, vote no, and get all these folks back to work. Does it literally make sense to anybody who even manages a household of their own business that we would say to everybody, go home and rest around a little bit here or there, we'll pay you later when we decide you can come back, for not being here? That makes absolutely no sense. Let them go back to work. We're going to pay them. Pay them now for the work they're doing. Pay concurrently with work. Doesn't that make more sense? Does it really make any sense at all? We're saying to them, we have no idea what the end game is here. You may be sitting around for a very long time while the country pays $300 million a day of the cost of the shutdown. For heaven's sakes, I say once again that we have to do this PQ today. We have to stop this nonsense. It is humiliating us. We cannot go on with this another week. We're only here today to maybe try to look like we're doing something because the government shut down, and we know it. Those bills that we're voting on today had no committee action, nothing. The Senate has made it perfectly clear they're not going to take them up. They will not become law, as every school child knows. Now, those who vote no on ordering the previous question will be giving this chamber what the leadership of the majority has not, and that will be the real chance to vote this down so that we can put the CR on the calendar and stop the shutdown now, today. The President, it doesn't have to go back to Senate. The President's waiting for it. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of the amendment in the record along with extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues, I beg my colleagues, I do implore my colleagues, for goodness sakes, come to the floor, defeat the previous question, vote no, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my good friend from New York. She's always a terrific, frankly, counterpoint and debater. And we agree on some things. We both agree that the government shutdown is not a good thing. Frankly, there's a strong bipartisan agreement. It's not something that either side wish to achieve, and it's something we ought to be working together step by step to try and undo. And frankly, we've made a little bit of progress. Again, the idea that it never works to work piecemeal, it certainly did with respect to the United States military, civilian defense force, and contractors. It's exactly what we did. We passed something out of here, and the Senate, which said it wasn't going to agree to anything, magically did. Now we're going to hopefully eventually pass House Resolution 3223 out of here to guarantee back pay. I think most people on both sides of the aisle will support that. The President's indicated he'll sign it, which suggests to me that the Senate will probably take it up and move it. So, voila, once again, just working through the process, we found something that we can agree on. The differences here should not be so great that they can't be bridged. Just to remind everyone of the history, we have placed multiple offers concerning the Affordable Care Act before the Senate. The last offer seems to me something that we ought to be able to agree on, or certainly be willing to sit down and discuss. Only has 2 points, and it's basically a question of fairness. Why should members of Congress and high appointees in the executive branch and our staffs go into the exchange and be able to bring subsidies with us when no other American can do that? It's just not fair. Now, we could amend the law and let everybody come into the exchanges with subsidies. That would be fair. Or we could say, you know, really members of Congress and their staff are at fundamental level, employees of the federal government, and they ought to be in that, and that would be fair. But let's treat everybody the same. More fundamentally, currently, the President has unilaterally decided to exempt 1,100 plus organizations. He's unilaterally, in a questionable measure constitutionally, decided to suspend parts of the law for a year and exempt big business. We think, gosh, if you're going to do that, shouldn't every single American have the right to decide whether or not they want to participate in this for just 1 year until everybody is actually operating under the same system? That, too, is a question of fairness. Give every individual American the same relief from a mandate that you're giving big business and big labor. It just seems to me commonsensical. Doesn't mean you have to stop the exchanges. Doesn't mean you have to stop the taxes. You don't have to undo the program. Just treat everybody the same. Be fair. That's the Republican proposal in front of the Senate right now. And frankly, I think they probably don't want to discuss it because it's a hard one to say no to, because it's fundamentally fair. And that's all we've asked, is that the Senate, which has rejected it, at least come to conference and talk about it. The real issue here, beyond the questions of policy, is the Senate going to be allowed to dictate unilaterally what the House does? Is it just going to say, nope, you've got to do it our way. We're not going to negotiate. We're not going to go to conference. We're not going to deal with you. You have to do it our way. That's not the way the system was set up. My friend and Chairman Mr. Rogers pointed that out quite succinctly. We've got a way to handle this. It's called go to conference, argue, work out the differences. And I suspect we're going to see the same thing a little bit down the road from the President, who's told us and told the Speaker this week, you know, I'm not going to negotiate with you on raising the debt ceiling in the United States. You just have to do it unilaterally. You have to put the country further into debt without any discussion of what we could do to change the trajectory of that debt. Now, that's a remarkable change from where he was in August of 2011. A remarkable change. He was in a very different place and position. He was willing to sit down and talk. I don't know why he would change that now. So I think we should do something in this bill to build on this piecemeal approach. We should pass these different measures. We agree these parts of government ought to be open and continue to work through in conference with our friends in the Senate and ultimately in negotiation with the President of the United States on the debt ceiling. And so I urge the adoption of this rule. In closing, I'd like to again thank the basic functions of government, or to fund government, of Congress, excuse me. This rule would allow 10 more pieces of that government to open again, to provide for crucial services that they provide. I'd urge my colleagues to support this rule and the underlying legislation. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
Question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.
And so while the voting continues in the House on this Friday afternoon, we want to use this opportunity